They bought my brother a $1.2 million villa, then arrived to seize my condo. I refused, and my dad spat in my face. Weeks later, they lost everything. I calmly replied, I know. My name is Nora. For 30 years, I have lived my life as the invisible daughter. While my older brother, Wyatt, was the blazing sun that my parents constantly revolved around, I was just a distant, quiet moon orbiting in the background. My parents always said Wyatt was destined to build an empire, to be someone incredibly important. I, on the other hand, was just steady, dependable Nora. The one who never needed anything. The one who never asked for anything. Maybe that is exactly why I built a life that runs on strict order and absolute discipline. I work in the city of Chicago as an independent financial analyst, specifically focusing on the behavioral psychology of investors. Every single day, I sit at my desk and look at the financial ruins of high-net-worth individuals. I analyze market trends, sure, but mostly I analyze human emotional bankruptcy. I watch people make reckless, irrational choices driven by ego, greed, and the desperate need to maintain an image they cannot afford. Because I deal with so much chaos and delusion during the day, my home needs to be the exact opposite. My condo in downtown Chicago is my absolute sanctuary. It is not huge, but I bought it with my own money that I saved penny by penny. It has clean lines, muted gray walls, and warm lighting. My bookshelves are organized by color and height. Everything has a place, and every place makes sense. I love coming home to the heavy, peaceful silence of my apartment after spending 10 hours listening to clients panic over their bad investments. Silence, to me, does not lie. It does not demand things from you. It was a chilly Tuesday evening in early October. The air outside carried that thin crispness that smelled like burning leaves and sudden change. I had just finished brewing a cup of chamomile tea, kicked off my heels, and settled onto my leather sofa with my laptop. I was reviewing a particularly messy portfolio of a client who had gambled away his retirement on terrible tech stocks. I took a deep breath, letting the quiet of the room wrap around me. And then, the intercom buzzed. It was not a normal buzz. It was 3 quick, frantic, heavy pushes of the button. The sound sliced through my quiet living apartment like a siren. My heart did a strange little jump in my chest. Nobody ever buzzed my apartment like that unless there was an absolute emergency or a terrible mistake. I set my tea down, walked over to the security monitor by the door, and looked at the grainy screen. Standing down in the lobby, looking completely out of place under the harsh fluorescent lights, were my parents. Victor and Diane. They lived in a quiet, affluent suburb about an hour and a half away. They never visited me. In the 5 years I had lived in this condo, they had crossed my threshold exactly 2 times, and both times they complained about the parking. Now, they were standing there, huddled together, looking up at the camera. I pressed the talk button, my voice cautious. Hello? Dad? Mom? Is everything okay? Let us in, Nora. My mother's voice cracked through the tiny speaker, sounding thin and frantic. Please. We need to come up right now. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. The rational, analytical part of my brain immediately flashed a red warning light. But they were my parents. You do not leave your parents standing on the street in the cold. I pressed the unlock button and waited by my door, listening to the heavy hum of the elevator bringing up what would soon be the destruction of my peace. When the elevator doors finally opened down the hallway, the first thing I saw was the luggage. 4 massive, hard-shell suitcases, scraping loudly against the hallway carpet. My father, Victor, was pulling 2 of them, his jaw set in that tight, aggressive line I knew so well. My mother, Diane, was dragging the other 2, her eyes wide, glossy, and rimmed with red. They looked like desperate travelers who had just been thrown off a sinking ship. I stood in my doorway, crossing my arms defensively over my chest. What is going on? I asked, keeping my voice low. Why do you have all this luggage? Diane dropped the handles of her suitcases and practically threw herself at me, pulling me into a desperate, theatrical hug. It felt stiff and rehearsed. We lost everything, Nora, she sobbed against my shoulder. We lost the house. I gently pushed her back, looking between her tear-stained face and my father's stony expression. Lost the house? What do you mean you lost the house? Was there a fire? Bad investments, Victor muttered, not making eye contact with me. He pushed past me, dragging his heavy suitcases directly over my pristine hardwood floors. The market took a bad turn. We are completely bankrupt, Nora. The bank took the property. We have absolutely nowhere else to go. I closed the door slowly, the lock clicking shut with a sound that felt entirely too final. I turned around and watched them dump their massive bags in the middle of my perfectly clean living room. Something immediately felt wrong. My professional brain, the one that dissects lies for a living, kicked into high gear. Bankruptcies do not just happen overnight. Banks do not just show up on a Tuesday and throw you out onto the street without months, sometimes years, of legal warnings. Wait, I said, stepping toward them. Which bank? Who holds your mortgage? Did you file for Chapter 7 or Chapter 11 bankruptcy? Have you spoken to a liquidator? Victor stopped unzipping his jacket and snapped his head toward me. His eyes were cold and furious. Are you seriously interrogating us right now? We just lost our entire lives, Nora. We are standing here homeless, and you want to do an audit? It is not an audit, Dad, I replied, keeping my voice perfectly steady. It is a basic question. If the bank foreclosed, there is a legal process. I deal with financial ruin every day. I can help you look at the paperwork. Where are the notices? We do not have the paperwork right now. He shouted, his voice echoing off my high ceilings. It is being handled by lawyers. It is complicated. You would not understand the complexities of our portfolio anyway. That was a familiar sting. You would not understand. It was the exact phrase they had used my entire life, whenever they wanted to shut me out or make me feel small compared to my brilliant older brother. I looked at my mother. She was already wandering into my kitchen, opening cabinets and looking inside like she was inspecting a hotel room. She did not look like a woman who had just lost her home of 30 years. She looked like a woman trying to decide where to put her coffee mugs. We just need to stay here for a few days, Diane said over her shoulder, not looking at me. Just until the dust settles and we can figure out a new plan. You have plenty of room here, sweetie. It is just you, after all. I looked at the 4 massive suitcases sitting on my floor. They did not pack for a few days. They packed for a season. But standing there, looking at my aging parents, the guilt I had been conditioned to feel my whole life bubbled up in my throat. I swallowed it down. Fine, I said softly. You can sleep on the pull-out couch in the living room. For a few days. But tomorrow, we are sitting down and looking at your finances. We need a real plan. Victor just grunted, walking over to my television and picking up the remote like he had lived there his whole life. As I walked back to my bedroom and locked my door, the silence of my sanctuary was gone. In its place was a heavy, buzzing anxiety. They were lying. I just did not know the price of the lie yet. A few days quickly bled into 2 full weeks. The temporary stay they promised had silently transformed into a permanent occupation. Instead of spending their days making phone calls to lawyers, searching for rental apartments, or trying to rebuild their shattered lives, my parents started nesting. They were sinking their claws deep into the walls of my home, slowly and systematically erasing my footprints. It started with the small, insidious things. On the 5th day, I came home from a long day of analyzing market crashes to find my kitchen completely rearranged. I am a person who thrives on routine. I had a specific drawer for my expensive, organic spices that I bought from a specialty market. When I opened that drawer to make dinner, it was empty. I panicked for a moment, pulling open every cabinet until I found my mother sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine. Mom, where are my spices? The ones in the glass jars? Oh, I threw those out, sweetie, she said casually, not even looking up from her page. They were taking up too much space. I went to the discount store and bought those big plastic bulk containers of garlic powder and salt. It makes much more financial sense. Plus, this kitchen really needed a woman's touch. It felt so cold before we got here. Now, it feels like a real family home. I stared at her, my jaw tight. A woman's touch? I am a woman. It is my home. I bought those spices because I like them. You do not throw away someone else's property. She finally looked up, her eyes immediately filling with those weaponized, theatrical tears. I am just trying to help, Nora. We are trying to contribute since we are living here. Why are you always so hostile to me? I walked away before I said something I would regret. But the invasion did not stop in the kitchen. The very next Saturday, I woke up to the sound of a drill echoing down the hallway. I threw on my robe and rushed out of my bedroom to find my father standing in front of my home office. He had completely dismantled the lock on the door. The metal pieces were scattered on the floor. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice rising. "That is my office. I have confidential client files in there." Victor did not stop drilling. He simply adjusted his glasses and kept working. "The hinge was squeaking," he muttered. "And besides, there is no need for locks inside a family home. Closed doors are incredibly rude, Nora. It makes us feel like we are not welcome. We are a family. We do not keep secrets from each other." The hypocrisy of that statement hit me so hard I felt physically dizzy. We do not keep secrets from each other. Seeing him stand there, holding a tool in my house, forcing his will onto my space, triggered a memory so vivid it made my chest ache. I was 19 years old. I had been working double shifts at a diner for 2 years, saving every single dollar in a joint college savings account my parents had set up for me when I was a kid. I was so proud of that money. One afternoon, I went to the ATM to withdraw funds for my textbooks, and the balance was zero. Completely empty. When I confronted them, Victor had looked at me with the exact same dismissive expression he was wearing right now. Wyatt needed a new luxury watch, he had told me. He is trying to get an internship at a massive tech firm. He needs to look the part to network with the right people. You are just going to community college right now, Nora. You do not need that kind of capital. You need to support your brother's future. They had stolen my savings to buy a shiny toy for the golden child and expected me to smile and accept it. Now, 11 years later, they were in my house, removing my locks, throwing away my things, and demanding that same blind compliance. The golden child dynamics had followed me right into my sanctuary. By the end of the 3rd week, the air in my condo felt so thick and toxic I could barely breathe. Every time I tried to bring up their supposed bankruptcy, they deployed a masterclass in financial gaslighting. One evening, I decided I had had enough of the stalling. I brought my work laptop to the dining table, opened a fresh, blank spreadsheet, and sat down across from them. "Listen to me," I said, using the firm, authoritative voice I used with my most stubborn corporate clients. "I do this for a living. I rebuild ruined portfolios. If you have debts, if the bank is coming after your remaining assets, we need a strategy. Give me the name of your creditors. Let me see the foreclosure notices. I will call the bank tomorrow and negotiate a settlement plan for you." Victor slammed his coffee mug down on the table so hard dark liquid sloshed over the rim. "I told you, my lawyers are handling it. Stop trying to manage my life." "You are living in my living room, Dad." I pushed back, refusing to break eye contact. "I have a right to know how long this is going to last. Give me one name. Just one piece of paper proving this bankruptcy." Victor stood up abruptly, leaning over the table. He physically reached out and slammed my laptop shut, nearly catching my fingers in the keyboard. "You are treating us like your damn clients instead of your own flesh and blood," he barked. "We raised you. We put a roof over your head for 18 years, and now you want to audit us when we are at our lowest point? You are a cold, ungrateful daughter." Diane buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with dramatic sobs. "We have nothing, Nora. Why do you insist on torturing us?" I sat there in the tense silence, looking at the two of them. It was a perfect performance. But it was a performance. Later that night, after they had gone to sleep on my couch, I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. As I passed the trash can, I noticed a glossy piece of paper sticking out from under some coffee grounds. I pulled it out and wiped it off. It was a piece of mail. It had been forwarded from their old address. But it was not a letter from a bankruptcy court. It was not a notice from a collections agency. It was a premium brochure for a luxury landscaping and pool maintenance company. And printed right on the front, clear as day, was my father's name. Victor. People who are going through Chapter 7 bankruptcy and losing their homes to the bank do not receive forwarded promotional mail for luxury pool services. The banks freeze everything. The mail changes. The paper trail is completely different. I stared at the glossy brochure in the dim light of my kitchen. The unease that had been sitting in my stomach for 3 weeks finally solidified into pure, cold certainty. They were not broke. They were hiding something massive. And they were using my home as a shield. The suspicion was no longer a feeling. It was a mission. The breaking point, the moment I finally decided to go behind their backs and uncover the truth, happened on a Thursday. It had been a brutal day at work. I had spent 8 straight hours dealing with a client who had lost millions in a terrible real estate gamble. My head was pounding, my feet ached in my heels, and all I wanted to do was walk into my quiet apartment, take a hot shower, and sleep for 12 hours. I unlocked my front door, pushed it open, and immediately froze. My apartment was not quiet. It was filled with the sound of clinking glasses, loud laughter, and jazz music playing from my expensive Bluetooth speaker. The smell of roasted garlic and heavy perfume hung in the air. I walked slowly into the living room and found 5 strangers, older couples dressed in casual evening wear, sitting on my furniture, drinking from my crystal wine glasses. My mother was standing by the kitchen island, wearing a nice dress, holding a bottle of my most expensive, imported red wine. A bottle I had been saving for a special occasion for over 2 years. "Oh, Nora is home," Diane announced brightly, waving her hand toward me. Everyone turned to look. I stood there in my tired work suit, clutching my briefcase, feeling like an intruder in my own home. Victor walked over, holding a glass of scotch, my scotch. "Everyone, this is our daughter, Nora. She is letting us crash in her spare space while we transition." "Transition?" one of the women asked, smiling warmly at me. "Your parents were just telling us about this lovely little place. Diane says it is their temporary retirement downsize while they look for something closer to the golf courses. It is so cute and compact. Perfect for a young, single girl like you." I felt the blood drain from my face. My temporary retirement downsize. They were not telling their friends they were bankrupt. They were not acting like victims. They were acting like they owned my property, and that my entire life, my sanctuary, was just a cute little temporary rest stop for their convenience. "Nora, sweetie," Diane chimed in, walking over and taking my arm. "Why don't you go into your room and rest? You look absolutely exhausted. We will try to keep the noise down." She was dismissing me. She was kicking me out of my own living room so she could continue playing the gracious host with my wine and my electricity. I did not scream. I did not throw a fit in front of her friends. I simply pulled my arm out of her grip, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "Enjoy the wine, Diane." I walked down the hallway, went into my bedroom, and locked the door behind me. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, listening to the muffled laughter and the clinking of glasses through the walls. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, but from a deep, volcanic rage. The lies were layered so thick I was drowning in them. They played the victim to me to get free rent, and played the wealthy retirees to their friends to maintain their status. I pulled my laptop out of my briefcase. I did not care about the noise anymore. I did not care about being a good daughter. The time for asking questions was over. I was a financial investigator. It was time to do what I did best. I opened my email and typed out a message to Julian, an old college friend who is now one of the top real estate lawyers in the city. "Julian, I need a massive favor. I need you to pull the public property registries and county tax records for my parents' address. Do a deep audit on their names. Something is wrong, and I need the paper trail by tomorrow." I hit send, closed the laptop, and listened to the party outside my door. They thought I was just quiet Nora. They were about to find out exactly what happens when you try to emotionally bankrupt an auditor. Thank you so much for listening to my story so far. If you are enjoying this, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below telling me which city you are watching from. Every single comment helps the video reach more people, and I truly appreciate your support. Now, let's get back to the story. The next morning, I left my apartment before the sun even fully rose. I could not bear to look at the empty wine bottles scattered across my kitchen counters, or listen to the sound of my father snoring loudly on the living room sofa. I grabbed a coffee from a corner shop and headed straight to a quiet, upscale cafe located just 2 blocks away from Julian's law firm. Julian arrived 20 minutes later, wearing a sharp navy suit, carrying a thick leather briefcase. We had not seen each other in over a year, but the serious expression on his face told me he had taken my late-night email very seriously. He sat down across from me and ordered a black espresso. "Are you okay, Nora?" he asked, leaning forward, his voice a low rumble over the ambient noise of the cafe. "You sounded pretty desperate in that message. It is not like you to go digging into family assets." "They showed up at my door almost a month ago," I explained, keeping my voice steady despite the rapid beating of my heart. "For huge suitcases. Claimed they lost everything in a market crash. Claimed the bank took the house and they were totally bankrupt. But nothing adds up, Julian. There are no letters from collectors. They're dodging every question I ask. And last night, they threw a dinner party in my house acting like wealthy retirees. I need to know the truth. Did they lose the house or not?" Julian sighed deeply, opening his briefcase. He pulled out a sleek silver tablet and connected it to the secure network of his firm. "When you asked me to look into it, I ran a preliminary search through the county tax assessor's database and the public property registry." He tapped the screen a few times, bringing up a complex-looking document filled with legal jargon and stamps. He turned the tablet toward me. "Nora," he said softly, looking me directly in the eyes. "There was no foreclosure. There is absolutely no record of any bank seizure, no bankruptcy filings in the district court, no Chapter 7, no Chapter 11. Nothing." I stared at the digital document. My breath hitched in my throat. "So, what happened to the house?" Julian pointed to a specific line on the screen. "They sold it. Voluntarily. It was a private, off-market transaction. Because they had paid off the mortgage years ago, they owned it free and clear. They sold the property for cash." I felt the ground completely drop out from beneath my feet. A cash sale. They had liquidated their most valuable asset on purpose. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. $950,000, Julian replied. "The funds cleared the escrow account exactly 5 weeks ago, right before they showed up at your door with those suitcases." My mind was racing, trying to process the magnitude of the lie. They had nearly $1 million in liquid cash. They were not homeless. They were incredibly wealthy. So where is the money? I demanded, my hands gripping the edge of the table. If they have all that cash, why are they sleeping on my couch and drinking my wine? Julian's face tightened. He swiped the screen to a second document. This one looked different. It was a wire transfer record and a new property deed. That is where the story gets really ugly, Nora. Prepare yourself. I looked down at the second document Julian had placed on the screen. It was a wire transfer receipt from my parents' joint bank account. The destination for the $950,000 was not a mutual fund, not a retirement account, and not a trust. It was an LLC, a limited liability company registered under the name Apex Ventures. Who owns Apex Ventures? I asked, though a sickening, cold feeling in my stomach was already whispering the answer to me. Julian tapped the screen one more time, bringing up the state business registry. The sole proprietor, the only name listed on the LLC, is Wyatt. Your brother. I stopped breathing. The cafe around me seemed to blur into white noise. Wyatt. It was always Wyatt. Julian continued speaking, his voice laced with professional disbelief. But he didn't just keep the cash, Nora. The very next day, Apex Ventures purchased a piece of real estate. A massive property in that ultra-exclusive gated community up north. He pulled up a listing photo. It was a sprawling, modern architectural masterpiece. Huge glass windows, a pristine swimming pool, manicured lawns. The purchase price was $1.2 million, Julian explained. Wyatt used the $950,000 from your parents as a massive down payment and took out a high-interest commercial mortgage for the rest. He put the entire property under his LLC to protect it from personal liability. I sat back in my chair, staring blindly at the ceiling of the cafe. The behavioral psychology of it all unfolded in my mind with terrifying clarity. It was the ultimate emotional bankruptcy. My parents were so deeply infected by the sunk cost fallacy regarding their golden boy. Wyatt had spent his 20s bouncing from one failed startup to another, always talking big, always needing capital. They didn't just favor him. They had willingly bankrupted their own future, liquidated their entire life's work, and handed him a literal fortune so he could buy a $1.2 million villa to play the role of a successful CEO. And then, when they had absolutely nothing left in their own bank accounts, they packed their bags and came to my door. They spun a pathetic story about market crashes to manipulate my empathy. They expected me, the daughter they had ignored, the daughter whose college fund they stole, to house them, feed them, and bear the financial burden of their survival, also Wyatt could sit in a $1 million mansion. They sacrificed me to build a throne for him. Nora? Julian asked gently, reaching across the table to touch my arm. Are you all right? What do you want to do? I can recommend a lawyer to help you formally evict them. I looked at Julian. The sadness, the guilt, the confusion I had felt for the past month completely evaporated. What was left behind was something cold, sharp, and utterly unbreakable. I do not need a lawyer to evict them, Julian, I said quietly, a dangerous calm settling over me. I just need the paper trail. I took out a flash drive from my purse and pushed it across the table. Download all of it. The deed sale, the wire transfer, the LLC registration, the villa listing. Everything. Julian nodded, his fingers moving quickly over the tablet. You are going to confront them. No, I corrected him, zipping my purse shut. Confrontation implies a discussion. I am going to execute a boundary. I did not go into the office that day. I called my manager, told her I had a severe family emergency, and took a personal day. My mind was operating with the terrifying, cold efficiency of a machine. My first stop after leaving Julian was a local print shop. I walked up to the counter, handed the clerk the flash drive, and asked him to print everything in high-resolution color. I wanted the ink to be bold. I wanted the numbers to leap off the page. I watched the printer spit out the undeniable proof of my parents' betrayal, the sale of their home, the $950,000 wire transfer to Wyatt, and the glossy photos of the $1.2 million villa. I put the documents into a thick, black leather folder. But I was not finished. I walked over to the shop's public computer, opened a browser, and downloaded an official, state-certified 30-day notice of eviction form. I filled it out meticulously. I put my name as the landlord. I put Victor and Diane as the unauthorized tenants. I signed it with a heavy black pen. I did not actually plan to wait 30 days, but as an analyst, I knew the importance of covering my legal bases. If the police needed to get involved, I needed to show that I was the legal owner removing hostile trespassers. By the time I returned to my condo, it was early afternoon. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was empty. My parents had gone out, probably walking around the city or shopping with the last remaining credit cards they hadn't given to Wyatt. The silence in my home felt different now. It was not peaceful. It felt violated. I walked directly into the living room. I pulled their 4 massive suitcases out from the corner. I unzipped them and laid them flat on the floor. And then I started packing. I moved systematically through my own home, reclaiming my space item by item. I went to the bathroom and threw my mother's expensive skincare bottles into her bag. I went to the coat closet and ripped my father's heavy jackets off the hangers. I gathered their shoes, their magazines, their chargers. I did not fold anything nicely. I just shoved their belongings into the luggage, zipping them shut with violent, jerky motions. When all 4 bags were packed, I dragged them, one by one, to the front entryway, lining them up right in front of the door like a barricade. Then I went to the kitchen island. I wiped down the counter. I placed the black leather folder directly in the center. I opened it, spreading the documents out like a deck of tarot cards predicting doom. The wire transfer. The LLC registration. The photo of Wyatt's villa. And right on top, the eviction notice. I made myself a cup of black coffee. I pulled up a bar stool, sat down across from the documents, and waited. I did not have to wait long. About an hour later, I heard the heavy sound of the lock turning. The door pushed open, hitting the barricade of suitcases with a dull thud. "What the hell is this?" My father's voice echoed in the hallway. "Why is all our luggage sitting by the door?" Diane walked in right behind him, carrying a shopping bag from an expensive bakery. "Nora? What are you doing? Are you cleaning?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling the dark, bitter liquid burn the back of my throat. I looked at the two of them standing there, looking confused and slightly annoyed. "No," I said, my voice ringing out clearly in the quiet apartment. "I am not cleaning. I am taking out the trash. Come into the kitchen. We need to have a final portfolio review." Victor dropped his keys onto the small console table by the door. His eyes started from the barricade of suitcases to the kitchen island where I was sitting. He marched into the room, his face flushed with sudden, defensive anger. Diane trailed behind him, the pastry bag crinkling in her grip. "What kind of sick joke is this, Nora?" Victor demanded, his voice echoing loudly. "You pack up our belongings while we are out getting breakfast? We are your parents. You do not treat us like unwanted tenants." I did not raise my voice. I simply tapped my index finger against the black leather folder sitting on the counter. "I am not treating you like tenants," I said calmly. "I am treating you like frauds. Come here and look at this portfolio, Dad." Since you refused to show me yours, I went ahead and audited it myself. Diane's face paled. She looked at Victor, a sudden panic flashing in her eyes. Victor hesitated, his bravado faltering for just a fraction of a second, before he stomped over to the kitchen island. He looked down at the documents spread out across the marble surface. I watched his eyes track over the papers. I watched him process the county tax assessor's stamp on the deed of sale. I watched his gaze lock onto the wire transfer receipt showing the $950,000 moving from his account to Apex Ventures. And finally, I watched him stare at the glossy, high-resolution photograph of Wyatt's $1.2 million luxury villa. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that occurs right after a bomb goes off, before the sound waves finally hit you. "You sold the house," I said, my voice slicing through the quiet. "You did not lose it in a market crash. The bank did not take it. You sold it voluntarily, for pure cash. And then you took every single penny of your life savings, every dollar of your supposed legacy, and you wired it to Wyatt." Victor opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He just stared at the papers, his jaw working uselessly. Diane let out a sharp, trembling gasp. She dropped the bakery bag onto the floor. The paper tore, and a couple of expensive croissants spilled onto the hardwood. "Nora, please," she whispered, her voice shaking violently. "You do not understand. We had to. You bought him a $1.2 million mansion," I continued, ignoring her tears because I knew now that they were nothing but weapons. "You funded his ego. You gave him a fortune so he could play the role of a tech millionaire in a gated community. And then, when your accounts were entirely empty, when you had nothing left to your names, you packed your bags and came to my apartment." Victor finally found his voice. He slammed his hand down on the counter, rattling my coffee cup. "Wyatt is building an empire," he shouted, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. "He has a vision. He needed the capital to secure investors. You cannot start a company from a tiny apartment. He needed a foundation. So you made yourselves homeless to buy him a palace?" I asked, my tone dripping with absolute disgust. "And what was your plan for me, Dad? Were you planning to sleep on my couch for the rest of your lives? Were you planning to let me pay your grocery bills, your medical bills, your utilities, while your golden boy throws pool parties in his villa?" "You have a steady job," Victor roared, stepping around the kitchen island to close the distance between us. "You are a single woman with no dependents. You sit in this fancy condo all day. You do not need the money. You do not understand what it means to build a legacy. Family supports family." "No," I corrected him, standing up from my bar stool so I was facing him directly. "Family supports family. Parasites drain their hosts. You lied to me. You used my home as a free hotel, you drank my wine, you threw parties for your friends pretending this was your retirement downsize, all while hiding $1 million secret. I reached down, picked up the state-certified eviction notice, and slid it across the counter until it touched his hand. You have exactly 1 hour to get yourselves and your luggage out of my property. Victor stared at the eviction notice like it was a venomous snake. His chest was heaving. I could see the veins bulging in his neck. The illusion of his authority, the absolute control he thought he had over his quiet, invisible daughter, was shattering right in front of him, and he could not handle it. You are not evicting us, he growled, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. I am your father. I brought you into this world. You owe us respect. I owe you nothing, I replied, my voice cold and unyielding. You spent my college fund on his luxury watches. You spent your retirement on his mansion. You made your choice. Go live in his guest house. Go ask the son you bought and paid for to take care of you. Diane rushed forward, grabbing Victor's arm. Victor, stop. Let's just talk to her, she pleaded, her makeup running down her face. Nora, sweetie, Wyatt cannot have us right now. He is hosting potential investors. It would look bad if his bankrupt parents were living in the spare rooms. We just need a little more time. The sheer audacity of her statement hit me like a physical blow. They were protecting his image even now. They would rather destroy my peace than cause Wyatt a moment of social embarrassment. I pointed toward the door. Get out. Now. Victor violently shook off Diane's hand. He stepped directly into my personal space. He was taller than me, broader than me. He tried to use his physical presence to intimidate me, looming over me with a furious, ugly expression on his face. You selfish, ungrateful little brat. He spat the words at me. We are not leaving. You cannot make us leave. This is a family matter, and I am the head of this family. I say we stay. I did not step back. I did not flinch. I looked him dead in the eyes, analyzing the sheer pathetic desperation of a man who had gambled his entire life away and lost. You are not the head of anything, Victor, I said quietly. You are a broke, manipulative old man standing in my kitchen. And I said no. The word no hung in the air. It was the ultimate rejection. Victor lost his mind. He did not raise his hand to hit me. He did not punch the wall. Instead, his face twisted into an expression of absolute, unadulterated hatred and contempt. He let out a harsh, guttural sound from the back of his throat. He gathered his saliva, leaned forward, and spat directly into my face. The warm, degrading moisture hit my left cheek. I felt it slide slowly down my skin, tracing a humiliating path toward my jawline. Diane screamed and covered her mouth in horror. Time seemed to completely stop. The heavy silence rushed back into the room, ringing in my ears. I did not move. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply stood there, feeling the spit on my face. In that one, vile action, Victor had told me exactly what I was worth to him. I was not his daughter. I was not a human being. I was just an object of his disgust because I refused to be used. Any lingering trace of guilt, any tiny, fragile thread of familial obligation that had been tying me to these people, snapped completely. It evaporated into nothing. I slowly lifted my hand. I took a pristine white napkin from the counter. I wiped my face with slow, deliberate precision. I dropped the soiled napkin into the trash can. Then, without saying a single word to him, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my cell phone, and dialed 911. Victor watched me hold the phone to my ear. A flicker of real panic finally broke through his rage. Who are you calling? He demanded, taking a step back. Put the phone down, Nora. 911 emergency, what is your location? The dispatcher's calm voice echoed from the earpiece. I gave them my exact address, my apartment number, and the gate code. Yes, I need officers dispatched immediately. I have 2 hostile trespassers in my home. One of them just physically assaulted me. They are refusing to leave the premises. Nora, hang up the phone right now. Victor shouted, lunging forward to grab my arm. I stepped back smoothly, keeping the island between us. I am the legal homeowner, I told the dispatcher clearly. I have my deed and their packed luggage ready. Please hurry. The male is acting aggressive. I ended the call and placed the phone on the counter. The police are 3 minutes away, I said, looking at Victor like he was a stranger on the subway. You have 2 choices. You can walk out that door right now, drag your bags into the elevator, and leave with a shred of dignity. Or, you can wait for the officers to escort you out in handcuffs. I really do not care which one you choose. Diane collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing hysterically, burying her face in her hands. Victor paced the living room like a trapped animal, muttering curses, running his hands through his thinning hair. He kept looking at the door, then at me, as if waiting for me to break, waiting for me to say it was all a joke and they could stay. I just watched him with empty eyes. Less than 5 minutes later, a heavy knock pounded on my front door. I walked past the barricade of suitcases and opened it. 2 uniformed Chicago police officers stood in the hallway, their hands resting cautiously near their utility belts. Are you Nora? The taller officer asked. Yes, officer. Come in. The moment the police entered the living room, Victor completely changed his demeanor. The furious, spitting tyrant instantly vanished, replaced by the image of a bewildered, helpless senior citizen. Officers, thank goodness you are here, Victor said, his voice trembling perfectly. There is a terrible misunderstanding. This is my daughter. We are just having a minor family disagreement. She is a bit emotionally unstable and overreacted. We are leaving soon anyway. The officers looked between Victor, Diane crying on the couch, and me standing perfectly calm by the kitchen. Miss, the officer asked, turning to me. He says this is a family dispute. What exactly happened here? I picked up the black folder. I am the sole owner of this property. Here is my deed. These 2 individuals have been staying here without a lease. Today, I asked them to leave. I presented them with this formal 30-day eviction notice to establish a paper trail, though they have no tenant rights. I paused, looking directly at Victor. Upon being asked to leave, this man became verbally abusive, stepped into my physical space, and spat in my face. The soiled napkin is in that trash can if you want to test the DNA. I want them removed from my property immediately. I want their keys returned to me. And I want it documented. The officer looked at the folder, looked at the perfectly packed bags by the door, and then looked at Victor. The polite, patient expression on the cop's face vanished. Sir, is this your luggage? Victor swallowed hard. Yes, but we have nowhere to grab your bags, sir. The officer pointed a stern finger at the door. You are legally trespassing. The homeowner has asked you to leave. If you do not step out into that hallway in the next 30 seconds, I am putting you in zip ties for assault and trespassing. Diane wailed, scrambling off the couch. She grabbed her purse and ran to her suitcases, struggling to pull 2 of them at once. Victor stood frozen for a second, the ultimate humiliation washing over his face. He looked at me one last time. There was no apology in his eyes, only a bitter, poisonous resentment. He grabbed his bags. The officers flanked them, ensuring they did not make any sudden moves. As they were marched out of my apartment and down the hallway, the door to the neighboring unit slowly opened. Mr. Abernathy, my elderly neighbor, stood in the doorway in his bathrobe, holding his morning newspaper, watching wide-eyed as Victor and Diane were humiliatingly escorted toward the elevators by the police. I stood in my doorway, watching the elevator doors slide shut, swallowing them whole. I went back inside. I took the spare keys they had left on the console table. I locked the deadbolt. I walked into the kitchen, poured the remaining coffee down the sink, and took a deep, clean breath. My sanctuary was finally mine again. For quiet, beautiful weeks passed. I hired a locksmith to change every single lock on my doors, upgraded my building security access, and threw away the mattress they had slept on. I bought new organic spices. I filled my home with silence and peace. I blocked their phone numbers, and I threw myself back into my work. I assumed they had finally gone to live with Wyatt in his $1 million mansion. I assumed they were sitting by his pristine swimming pool, drinking expensive wine, and complaining about their ungrateful daughter. I was wrong. It was a busy Wednesday afternoon. I was in my office, running a complex risk assessment model for a corporate client, when my personal cell phone started buzzing violently on my desk. I glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number. I ignored it. 30 seconds later, it buzzed again. Then again. Then a text message popped up. "Nora, please pick up. It is Maya, Wyatt's girlfriend. It is an absolute emergency. Please." I stared at the screen. I had only met Maya a handful of times. She was young, pretty, and deeply enamored with Wyatt's fake millionaire persona. I sighed, picked up the phone, and hit dial. "Maya?" I said as soon as the line connected. "What is going on?" "Nora." "Oh my God, thank you for calling back," Maya sobbed into the phone. The background noise was chaotic. I could hear people shouting and the sound of heavy furniture being dragged across a floor. "You have to come here. Wyatt is losing his mind. He locked himself in the master bathroom and he will not come out." "Come where?" I asked, keeping my professional, detached tone. "To the villa?" "Yes. The bank is here, Nora. The creditors are here. They are taking everything." I stopped typing on my keyboard. "Taking everything? What do you mean?" "My parents bought that house in cash. They put down $950,000. He leveraged it." Maya cried hysterically. "Wyatt wanted to launch a new software application. He took the deed to the villa and used it as collateral to take out 2 massive, high-interest commercial loans. Millions of dollars, Nora. He said the app was going to be the next big thing, but the developers scammed him. The product failed. He spent the rest of the loan money on 2 imported sports cars, luxury watches, and massive parties to keep up his image. The loans defaulted 3 weeks ago." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, staring blankly at the Chicago skyline out my window. My brother, the golden child, the supposed genius entrepreneur, had taken nearly $1 million of pure cash, leveraged it against toxic debt, and completely blown it on cars and parties. It was a textbook case of emotional bankruptcy. His ego had driven him straight off a financial cliff. "Where are Victor and Diane?" I asked coldly. "They are here." Maya wept. "They are sitting in the driveway crying. The repo men just towed Wyatt's sports cars away. The bank representatives are serving the final foreclosure papers. The villa is gone, Nora. The company is bankrupt. We have absolutely nothing. They are going to lock the gates by tonight. Please, you have to help us." "Maya," I said, my voice as smooth and cold as glass. "You're dating a fraud. Pack your bags and call your own family. I am not a rescue service." I hung up the phone and blocked her number. I did not smile. I did not laugh. I just opened my spreadsheet and went back to work. Karma had not just knocked on Wyatt's door. It had kicked the door off its hinges and repossessed the house. 2 days later, I received a voicemail from a number I had not blocked. It was Clara, my father's mother. My grandmother. Nora, her voice was stern, gravelly, and commanded respect. "You need to come to my house this evening. Your parents and your brother are here. I know what happened. I know everything. Come at 6 o'clock. Grandma Clara lived in a modest, working-class neighborhood on the south side of the city. She was a tough, no-nonsense woman who had survived the Great Depression. She had always thought Victor spoiled Wyatt, but she had kept her distance. If she was summoning me, it meant the fallout was complete. I arrived precisely at 6. I wore a sharp, tailored black suit, carrying my expensive leather handbag. I looked like exactly what I was, a highly successful, independent woman who did not need them. I walked up the creaky porch steps and pushed open the front door. The scene in Grandma Clara's small, faded kitchen looked like an oil painting of a defeated army. Victor, Diane, and Wyatt were sitting around the scarred wooden dining table. They looked absolutely destroyed. They had aged 10 years in a single month. Victor was hunched over, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow and staring at the floor. Diane's hair was unwashed, her face pale and devoid of makeup. And Wyatt, the golden child, the fake CEO, was sitting in the corner, chewing his fingernails, looking pale, terrified, and utterly pathetic. In the corner of the room, piled high, were the exact same 4 massive suitcases my parents had brought to my apartment. They were truly homeless now. Clara sat at the head of the table, sipping black tea. "Sit down, Nora," she commanded. I did not sit. I stood by the door, my arms crossed. "Why am I here, Clara?" Diane broke first. She slid off her wooden chair, falling to her knees on the linoleum floor. She clasped her hands together, looking up at me with genuine, unscripted terror in her eyes. "Nora, please," she wailed, tears pouring down her face. "We are so sorry. We were so stupid. Wyatt lost everything. The bank took the villa. They took the cars. The LLC is completely bankrupt. We have no money for a hotel. Clara says we can only stay here for 1 week. Please, let us come back to your condo. We will sleep on the floor. We will clean for you. Just please do not leave us on the street." Wyatt finally looked up. He did not look arrogant anymore. He looked like a scared child. "Nora, I messed up," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I thought I could double the money. I thought I was a genius. I am so sorry. If you just loan me $50,000, I can hire a lawyer to fight the bank." I held up my hand, cutting him off instantly. "Do not speak to me about money. You do not even know what the word means." Victor slowly stood up. He could barely look me in the eye. He rubbed a trembling hand over his face. "Nora, what I did in your apartment, the way I treated you, the spit." He choked on the word. "I was out of my mind with stress. I was terrified of losing the money, and I took it out on you. It was unforgivable. But we are your family. We are begging you. Show us some mercy." I looked at the three of them. I looked at the parents who stole my college fund, lied to my face, invaded my sanctuary, and spat on me. I looked at the brother who happily took $1 million and burned it to the ground for his own ego. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger. No pity. Just a profound, clinical emptiness. "You made an investment," I said, my voice echoing coldly in the small kitchen. "You put all your capital into a high-risk asset because you were blinded by emotional attachment and ego. The risk rate was 100%. The asset failed. Now, the bank is issuing a margin call. And you have to pay it." I looked directly into Victor's eyes. "I am not a bank. I am not a homeless shelter. And I am certainly not your family anymore. You spat on the only safety net you had. But where will we go?" Diane sobbed, clawing at the floor. I adjusted my hand back on my shoulder. That sounds like a problem for Wyatt's empire to solve. I turned around, opened the front door, and stepped out into the cool, crisp evening air. I walked to my car, got in, and drove back to my perfectly quiet, perfectly clean sanctuary. I never spoke to them again. They say that holding on to anger is toxic, and that family is everything. But sometimes, anger is the only shield you have to protect your peace. I left them with nothing because they were willing to leave me with nothing to protect their golden child. Am I wrong for walking away and keeping my door locked forever? Should I have given them one last chance now that they are truly homeless and broken? Thank you for watching till the end. If my story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to protect your own sanctuary from toxic family members, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more stories like this. Stay strong and always protect your peace.